So hey guys, it's granny square making day. For those of you who don't know what a granny square is, this is a crochet granny square. The thing about these is if you make enough of these little granny squares, you can join them together and make a really cool homemade blanket that no one else has. So this is going to be a unique for the person who receives this gift, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for a family member or a friend. It's going to be something super unique. I'm just going to let you know some of the little tips of how to make a granny square blanket. I am not by any means a crochet expert, so this is going to come in handy for all of you beginners. What you basically need, obviously, is you need a crochet hook and you need some yarn or some wool. That's how you start with any crochet project of any sort. Let me just run through a few basic things before we get started. I've been using a number 5mm crochet hook, and the thing is, the smaller the crochet hook, the smaller the squares are going to look, and the more fiddly it gets. I've been using this kind of 100% wool rather than the acrylic stuff, and this one, all the wools that I've been using have been 8-ply. And the thing about it is, when I first started to learn how to crochet, all the granny square patterns were teaching you how to do what's called a magic circle or a magic ring. So you basically go round and round and the rings get bigger, and you get a circle that's smaller and gets bigger and bigger. The good thing about that is it allows you to adjust the size of the granny squares as you go. But I found that really difficult as a beginner. I was hopeless at doing magic circles or magic rings, and I learned this other way, which has its own caveats, and I'll go into that shortly. I learned this other way where instead of doing little circles that get bigger and bigger and bigger, you just go up and down in rows. So you don't have to worry about getting the corners turned. You don't have to worry about like getting that part of it perfect. But the only caveat of that is once you've decided the width of your granny square, you can't adjust it because you're just going back and forth like this. If you're going to do it with this simpler technique, you've just got to figure out what is the size of each of the granny squares, and you've just got to decide that's it. You're not going to adjust it any further. One other thing is, before you start, when you're doing multiple granny squares, you're going to be doing it over a course of days, weeks, months, or even longer. You just got to remember what size crochet hook you use, because if you forget about the size of your crochet hook and you start using different crochet hook sizes, your granny square is going to end up different sizes and it's going to look super weird. The other option that you can do is when you do them, you can actually combine different colors. So half your granny square can be red, the other half can be pink. You can do different ratios. You can get fancier and do little patterns, but I'm just going to show you in this video how you can just make a granny square out of 2 different colors and just join the wool together, and you're going to make a really cool granny square that kind of looks like that. The one I'm doing is actually 18 stitches wide, and you get this granny square at the end, which is about 13 centimeters in kind of width, and because it's a square, the width is the same as the length. It will take you probably 100 granny squares to make a proper blanket, if not more. So that's something to consider. If you use fatter wool, bigger hook, it's going to take you less time, but this is the way I've chosen. And once you've chosen it, it's kind of like your destiny. You can't really change it. So let's get on with it. But like I said, this is going to be super simple. I'm doing this from the point of view as a beginner. So nothing fancy, nothing tricky. The first thing is, when you get the wool, you just got to find the end, and I just chucked the other end on the floor. It doesn't really matter, but if you want to be more kind of organized, that's fine as well. And the first thing you got to do is you need to do a slip knot. When you do a slip knot, which is kind of the beginning of your first chain, which you use to start as the basis for your granny square, to do a slip knot, all you do is grab your end, put it behind your hand, loop that over, so you kind of got something like that on the front. You slip your hook over like that, and you pull one through, and then you've got yourself here a knot, and it slips because you pull it back. You've got a little bit of a tail, and all I do is then I do 18 chains. So you just grab your yarn and you just do 1, 2. These techniques are really easy to learn. There's loads of YouTube tutorials about how to make chains and double crochets and all sorts of stuff like that, and that's not the point of this video. I'm just going to show you that you just make a chain of 18, and I'm going to be talking to you, so I'll probably lose count and start again. But the thing is with this is it's just kind of important that you remember the numbering, especially when you're doing rounds in other crochet projects. If you forget the numbering of the chains or the crochet stitches, you're going to get yourself into trouble. So you either remember it or you mark it. But here you go, here's a chain of 18. Doesn't have to be too fancy, it's just a blanket. Little imperfections are actually going to add to the character of this blanket rather than detract from it. So two holes from the last chain, you're going to do a double crochet. Double crochet means you're actually going to take this loop of yarn and actually shove it through the hole, as opposed to a single crochet, which you don't take that extra loop of yarn and put it through the hole. Go ahead and you do your double crochet. And because I've got a fat needle, it gets a little bit more tricky. It's all about learning your craft and taking your time. I'm going to do 2 of those through the first set. And once you've done the 2, I'm going to find now the 3rd hole after that. So you've got to make sure that it just works out at the end. For the rest of this chain, and I'm going to do 3 double crochets. So from now on, for the rest of this row, you can do 3 double crochets through each one. Once you do that, you're going to find the next entry point, which is 3 more holes further down the chain. And it's pretty repetitive, and that's the whole thing about a lot of this craft stuff, whether it's crochet or knitting or whatever. A lot of it's just repetitive, and you ask yourself why you do this, because it's not like you're doing anything different every time, but you do this because you create something unique. It's something that's personalized, and it's just fun. This is something that you could easily do when you're sitting in front of the TV. It's something you can easily do when you're on a bus or a train, and it just kind of distracts you a little bit. I find this as a very positive thing for me, because it just distracts my brain from thinking about silly things all day long. If you're anything like me and you have this tendency, another 3 holes down, you keep going, and if you have this tendency where your brain just spins continuously forever, something like a hobby like this where you just get completely engrossed in something. My other favorite hobby at the moment is actually collecting Pokemon cards, and that also helps me get my brain off other things. I find them both really super beneficial, and it's reducing my stress levels, and we all need to reduce our stress levels a little bit, because life isn't that much fun sometimes, and if you spend your whole day thinking about stuff and problems, you're going to be pretty miserable. So this is kind of the origin story of why I started all these handcrafts and things. And then you're going to get 3 more. So you're now 2 more lots of stitches away from the tail. And if you've counted yourself right, it'll be perfect. And if you don't, and you find yourself saying, oh, there's 4 holes, or there's only 2 holes for your last one, then you know you've done something wrong, and you kind of have to go back and start again. And trust me, I've started again on these projects many times. And it's just a matter of getting used to doing what you're doing. And then it becomes pretty easy, because this is all very repetitive. Let's face it, you're doing 100 of the same thing. And I've got it into the last hole. And let's face it, you can't get this right after 100 goes. Perhaps you should stop. I'm now at the end. I'm just going to do 3 double crochets to end the first row. Basically what you're going to do is you're just going to wind up and down this pattern until you get the length which matches the width. And then you're good to go, and then you're ready to start another one. At the end of every row, so that's the first row, at the end of every row I just do a chain of 3. So 1, 2, and 3. You flip the thing around, and what you'll notice is there are going to be like little gaps between, and that's where you want to do the next row of stitches. After you do your first row, you do 3 double crochets into that hole, that hole, that hole, that hole, and that hole, and then I'll show you what happens when you get to the end of the second row, and then it becomes just a really repetitive thing. You do your double crochet through that hole there, which I made a mess of because I didn't do it properly. So take the hook, pull it through, grab that. So you're going to have 3 loops on your hook, and just pull through the first 2, and you pull through the last 2, and then you just keep going back and forth, and I'll come back in a minute. So I'm nearly at the end, so I'm doing my final double crochet in this row, so to speak. I'll explain that to you as well in a second. So once you've done that row, it looks kind of like that, but you notice that there's a little bit on the end, so it's not quite come to the end. What you need to do here is for every row, you're going to do 1 double crochet into the 3 chains of the first row. This bit gets a bit fiddly the first time, so just find the first chain of your first row. It truthfully doesn't matter if you're slightly off. but you want to grab kind of 2 strands of yarn, 2 loops of yarn. Basically, you grab that and then you do just 1 double crochet through there. And I've stuffed up because I forgot to bring the yarn through the hole. My bad. Yeah, this bit I always find really fiddly. It happens the first time. So once you clear the first one, it gets easier. So you do your double crochet. And then, because it's the end of the row, you do 3 chains so that you get started on the next row. There you go. There's your first 2 rows of the granny square. And all you do now is you turn it around, and you'll notice here that there's only 1 stitch and then there's a hole. So you put 2 double crochets in there and you do 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. You do chain 3, you turn it around, and you'll figure it out that every alternate row it'll end with 3, and the other row you'll end up with 1 double crochet. And when you turn it around, you either start with 2 double crochets where it goes into the first hole, or if it looks like there's already 3 at the start, you do 3 double crochets. And I'll just explain that as I go. So because this one has a gap right at the start, you only put 2 double crochets into there to start this new row. And this is the most annoying bit. It's when you run out of yarn and you've got to pull the ball through. So you do 2. So you go 2, and then you move on to the next one, and all the stuff in the middle, apart from maybe the first one, which is every second row, you do 3 double crochets. Now there's all this talk about nomenclature and American and British single crochets and double crochets. That gets a little bit confusing, but it doesn't need to be. So with a double crochet, you just remember you've got to pull the wool through the hole. And with a single crochet, you don't. And you just keep moving along, let's go, And how long does it take to make a granny square? Well, I get distracted a lot, but I reckon that if you did this with a concerted effort, you could probably make one of these every 15 or 20 minutes, so maybe 3 or 4 of these an hour. So yes, it does take a long time, but you can imagine how long it takes to, to knit a scarf or knit a jumper or knit a pair of booties or something like that. It does take time. Don't take this as a hobby that you can do stuff really quickly and get everything done in 2 seconds. This is only an issue. Time really is only an issue when you're doing this hobby in an attempt to try and sell stuff, because obviously you've got to factor in labor costs if you're actually trying to price something to sell. But if you're just making it for your own enjoyment, and if you're just using it to make it for yourself or you make it as a gift, it really doesn't take that into consideration. It doesn't really matter how long it takes you to make one of these, as long as you do it, as long as you enjoy yourself. The problem with any extended project of any sort of craft is that you've got to persevere, because a lot of people do half of this and they run out of time. So you get to the end now, and because it looks like that, and you notice there's more length here and there's a 3 double crochets here, you're going to do 3 on the end. And because it is a craft that takes a lot of time, like the expression says, all good things take time, and this is no different. If you think you're going to get this done in 2 days, you're not, and you'll just give up. So if you're going to enter this craft with that sort of attitude, you might as well not enter it at all, because you're just going to know you're not going to make it through the other end. So I'm just going to talk you through this one more time. You've got it to the end, you've done 3, you're going to chain 3 at the end so you can flip it around and start your next one. So like I was saying before, when you flip it around here, there's no gap for 1. So you put 3 there, so 3, 3, 3, 3, and then you do that 1 on the other end. So you're alternating basically 3 and 1. And as we get to the end of another row, I just want to remind you that sometimes when we do craft, we stick our head down like this for long periods of time, and you just got to rest yourself from time to time, because the last thing you want is you want to sit here and you end up with a sore neck. Once you've done it for a while, give it a bit of a break, go for a walk, go for a stretch, go have a cup of tea, do whatever else you want to do for a little while, just to give yourself a little bit of a break. And your fingers and your wrist gets a bit sore after doing this for a little while as well. And just don't get frustrated. The thing about doing all these craft things is you get really frustrated and then you quit. And when you quit, you get nowhere. So you can see here now, there's no room for 3 double crochets at the end, so I'm just going to do 1 double crochet. Yeah, so it's a very repetitive pattern. And then we do a chain of 3 again. And you flip it over, and now you can see there's a gap before the 3 double crochets, so this time you do 2. As I continue to do this granny square, I just want to talk to you about a couple of other things. One is that when people start doing this craft, especially when they're making critters, they get really hung up on the aim of perfection. Now, just remind yourself, this is handcraft. Nothing's perfect. There are little flaws, there are little inconsistencies, and that's what makes them unique, and that's what makes them handcraft. If you want every pattern, everything to look exactly the same, you do it with a machine. You don't do it with human factor involved. Don't get annoyed if, like, when you're making a crochet toy, that the eyes are slightly off center or the tail looks a bit weird and looks different to the last one, because that's what gives them character. Don't get discouraged if yours doesn't look like exactly the pattern that you're making it with. And the other thing I just wanted to say is, don't let people talk you out of doing craft. A lot of people think that, crochet is for old ladies. Well, do I look like an old lady to you? It's not what other people say. It's something, if you enjoy doing it, if you find it enjoyable, fun, therapeutic, profitable, whatever motivates you to do this, you just go ahead and do it, because no one should be able to stop you from having fun. Whether it's crochet as a hobby, whether it's collecting Pokemon cards, whether it's going to museums, whether it's cooking, whether it's flipping sneakers, whatever you want to do, you just go ahead and do. And look how that's turning out. Whatever you do, you just keep doing it. It's all about having fun. It's not about trying to appease other people. And if people want to judge you for being a 20-year-old male crocheter, whatever the hell you like to call it, just let it be. That doesn't reflect on you at all. And if you're going to stop something you like because someone's judged you and someone's told you that this is weird, and you make a mistake, you just stop and you just go back. But yeah, so if you really like to crochet, or if you really want to do something and you're allowing somebody who's going to make fun of you and actually stop you from pursuing the hobby you want, the only person who loses that is you, because they don't care. Once they've made fun of you, whether it's to your face or online, they're going to get on with their lives, and they're not going to care about the fact that you really like this and I've just wrecked it for you. They're just going to not give a shit. So if you want to crochet, you go ahead and do it. If you want to knit leg warmers for your dog, go ahead and do it, because no one will be able to stop you. And the thing about it is, I've always considered the term nerd as a term of endearment. I love being called a nerd, because there's a lot of stuff that I do which people find weird, because let's face it, a lot of people who, especially younger people, prefer to go out and party and drink and go to pubs, go to nightclubs and all that kind of stuff. And I'd rather stab myself in the eye with this crochet needle than to do any of that stuff. And they frown upon people who like to pursue other hobbies, perhaps less destructive and often less expensive hobbies. And, who cares? You can see after a while, I'm not even halfway through this pattern. And if suddenly I decide that this is a time that I want to change color, and we can get a multicolored granny square, it's really simple. And I'm just going to show you how to do that. And basically, you want to leave off a decent amount of yarn, so you've got something to work with. And now I just got to find myself. That was close. A pair of scissors. I'm just going to cut this. Cut. I'm not particularly precise, because I don't have to have I don't need it to change color at an exact precise spot. And if you do, it gets a little bit more fiddly, because you've got to work out exactly where you want to cut. And if you wanted to swap it to this pink yarn, you don't need to do another slip stitch or anything like that. If there are fancier ways to do it, but all I do is I just get the two ends and tie them together, if I don't keep dropping it. So somehow you just tie them together. You just got to make sure that whatever you do, that it ends up being secure, because you're using that as a method of joining too. So just do whatever you want, basically. The whole thing about crochet is there's no right or wrong. As long as it looks good at the end, it's fine. So I'm doing, okay, not like that. Just going to pull them really close together. There are really fancy ways of making this lot not look really small. Now once I've done that, all I do is I'm just going to snip off the long end bits so it looks like it was never meant to be a join. There we go. So they're kind of joined together. Like realistically, if you pull really hard, it'll come apart. So the trick is when you do the next couple of double crochet stitches, you just be a little bit gentle. Because it is just a giant granny square blanket, people aren't really going to notice if there's like a little joints. And you notice that at the moment the thread or the wool is still red. You won't notice the change straight away. Like I said, if you just do it the way I've just done it right now, you can't really strategically plan exactly where you want to change the color. You can fiddle around with it and get it precise, but I really don't see the point. And I think it's just nice to have random stuff because you're making 100 of these, and the more random it is, the more it's going to look like, you know, Joseph's Technicolor Dreamcoat. And I think that's actually going to be pretty neat. I'm just going to continue doing this just for a moment so you can actually see the wool transition from red to pink. And then after that, I probably won't come back until the whole pattern is finished, because I think now you've probably heard enough of me raving on about various things, and you just want to get on with your own little crochet pattern. I can see the change coming up soon. Here we go. It's very exciting. There's some things that just make me excited about it. And make sure you just don't step on your wool. And it's all gone weird now. I don't know what happened there, and must have stepped on something. The camera went funny, but let's get back to it. So we're getting to the point now where the change is coming. So you can see it there. The change is coming. So I'm just going to continue as though it's the same wool. Like I said, just here, just be a little bit more gentle because it is a joint. But now, I'm now just crocheting with the pink wool, and you have a change. So I didn't plan exactly this part of the pattern to be where the wool changed color, but it really doesn't matter. If you think about it, it really doesn't make any difference as to where the granny square changes color. And as I progress through this last bit, I don't know why I'm so close now. And as I go through the last section of this change, just remember the pattern stays the same. Nothing changes, nothing alters. You're just changing the color of the wool, and you're actually just basically pretending that the wool hasn't changed actually, and just using the same wool, and you just happen to buy wool that changes to pink halfway through. So here we go, and I'm just going to do a chain 3 so I can flip it over to do the next slot. And there you go. There's a change in color of your pattern, and I think it looks pretty cool. So you guys can see now that there's been a complete change in color of the granny square. Now, if you feel like it, you could go ahead and change the color once again. And I've been known to do that occasionally, depending on my mood. But if you can't be bothered, you just finish the rest of the square with the same color. And then you have yourself one whole granny square. So this has taken a bit of a while. I'm not really quick with this stuff, and you just got to remember that if you're slow, you're slow. It's not a race. You don't get bonus points for finishing first, and you don't get penalized for finishing last, because it's just you enjoying your hobby. True. So here we are so far. It feels like we're getting close. My rule of thumb is, there's something easy to remember, is you always end this pattern with 3 double crochets right at the end. So if you find that you think you're level, but you're ending it with the single crochet, then you need to do another row, or you've done 1 row too many. You can, if you want to, you can measure the thing at the end with a measuring tape or something just to make sure you get it correct. But I find if you've done them before, you can just put it over the previous one to make sure it's the same, or you can just eyeball it. It's roughly 13 centimeters from memory using this particular size of crochet needle and the thickness of the wool. Yours might differ. You may want to make this wider or less wide. Just remember, whatever you do, when you do your first chain on the first row, that determines your width, and you do it in a multiple of 3. So I do 18. You could theoretically do 15, 21, 24, 27, 30, whatever you like. It just ends up being bigger. And if you're happy to have less pattern, which means that you're just doing bigger squares, that's cool as well. And if you want to do really small ones and make them really fiddly, that's also fine. Just remember multiples of 3. Now I'm almost at the end. I'm really glad that I've been able to do this in one sitting, and I can show you the end of it prior to me having lunch, because I'm hungry and we've got an appointment this afternoon. But I'm glad that I can show you the finished product so you know. I'm on to the last. There's that hole that I'm going to do 3 double crochets into. Hopefully you guys have found this kind of mini tutorial useful. I'm by no means expert. I actually found a pattern for this early on when I first started, when I didn't know how to do the magic rings, but I've lost it. I can no longer find that on the internet, and I've just made this up. Now I've finished that row. If I take the other one, which is the one I did last night, and if you superimpose them on top of each other, just going to pull this right out so you can see. So if I stretch it out, superimpose it onto each other, they're the same size. That and that. This is actually throwing the camera off a lot, but they're both the same size, so we're done. Let's get the camera back into the right position. I'm going to show you. We're done. There's the finished product. But what you need to do now is you need to, I leave a kind of a long tail because I use that to sew that together eventually, about 100 years an hour when I've done enough. So I'm going to leave a big long tail. I'm going to snip it. And the simplest way is if you leave it like this and anything happens, this is going to pull out and it's going to pull half your pattern out. So what I do is I take the tail end, pull it through, and now nothing's going to happen. So this is it. This is the finished product. This is a granny square. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe if you like my videos, and I'll catch you next time in another video. Have a great crocheting day. See ya.